Morning, everyone. Can I just check that the YouTube's live? It is. I'm getting the thumbs up. Thank you very much. Good morning. I am Councillor Nigel Moxon, the chair of this committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting of the Place Select Committee, which is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. Just like to extend a special warm welcome to India and Eddie, who are student placement on the legal team, who are joining us this morning, and then welcome to Councillor John Cotty and to Councillor Tom Smith, who've attended their first Place Scrutiny Committee. So thank you very much for attending. So first of all, agenda item number 1 is Chairman and Vice Chairman appointments. So it is to note the appointment at full council on the 11th of May 2023 of myself, Councillor Nigel Moxon as Chairman, and Councillor Tom Hollis as Vice Chairman of the Place Select Committee for the 23-24 municipal year. Doesn't need a second there, doesn't it? No. And then agenda item number 2 is to note the committee membership for the Place Select Committee, which is as follows: Councillors Richard Butler and Callaghan, Penny Gowland, Mike Introna, John Ogle, Kane, Roger Upton, Jonathon Wheeler, and Elizabeth Williamson. So is that noted? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item number 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. So if I ask the committee to approve the minutes of the last meeting as recorded. In favour, thank you. I will sign those off at the end. Agenda item number 4, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence this morning?
There are, yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Introna. Councillor Nigel Turner is substituting. Councillor John Ogle with Councillor Eric Kerry substituting. Councillor Tom Hollis with Councillor Francis Purdy-Haran substituting. And Councillor Penny Gowland with Councillor Pauline Allen substituting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all those substitutes. Item number 5, declaration of interest. Has anybody got any interest to declare this morning? Nope. Okay. Right, straight into it then. Item number 6 is the crime and disorder strategy. And if I could ask Councillor Cotty, who's a cabinet member for communities, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the welcome for the first appearance at the Place Select Committee. The report seeks to inform the scrutiny of the delivery of the crime and disorder strategy, the Nottinghamshire Community Safety Agreement 23 to 25, as required by the Crime Disorder Regulations 2009. Excuse me, and look forward to your comments on the agreement, etc. On my left, I have Vicky Cropley, who is the Programme Manager for the Safer Nottinghamshire Board, and behind is Councillor Tom Hollis, who actually attends the Safer Nottinghamshire Board. So I'd like to just hand over straight away to Vicky Cropley, who would like to do her presentation for you. Thank you. Tom Smith, sorry. My apologies. All right, John. It's the nerves. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you. So we're here today so the committee can scrutinise the Nottinghamshire Community Safety Agreement, part 1 of which was circulated with the papers. And this agreement is our crime and disorder strategy for the county, which is overseen by the Safer Nottinghamshire Board, which I'm the programme manager for. So firstly, a brief look at the legislative background to the Community Safety Agreement, the Safer Nottinghamshire Board, and also what brings us here today. So the Crime Disorder Regulations place a duty on local authorities to establish a Crime Disorder Scrutiny Committee to look at crime disorder issues, and within the County Council, the Place Select Committee fulfils this function. This slide sets out the legislation that requires responsible authorities, including the County Council, Nottinghamshire Police, the Fire and Rescue Service, Probation and the District and Borough Councils to form partnerships to address community safety issues. At district and borough level, The legislation initially led to the creation of 7 community partnerships across the county, but subsequently Gedling, Broxtowe and Rushcliffe got permission from the Home Secretary to formally merge, and in Ashfield and Mansfield there are now joint strategic group arrangements in place, and also Bassetlaw and Newark. So there is often reference to the 3 community safety partnerships across the county, and the city has its own arrangements. In 2-tier areas, there are specific requirements that are set out in this slide. So in Nottingham City, there is 1 community safety partnership covering the whole area. However, in the county, in addition to the 3 community safety partnerships at district and borough level, there is a county-wide strategic coordination group, which is the Safer Nottinghamshire Board. This is chaired by the County Council Chief Executive, and the membership replicates that of the community safety partnerships. The Police and Crime Commissioner is not a statutory member of the board, but on the board as part of a duty to mutually cooperate. The legislation also gives membership of this board to the equivalent of the County Council Community Safety Portfolio, so Councillor Tom Smith. The board also includes the 3 community safety partnership chairs to ensure the 2-way joint working between the local level partnerships and the county-wide board. And the requirement of the board is to prepare and implement a community safety agreement, setting out the county-wide priorities and how activity will be coordinated. This slide sets out the priorities in the current community safety agreement, which commenced in April this year and runs until the end of March 2025. And these priorities will be reviewed annually in January each year to ensure they are still appropriate. In identifying the priorities, the board considered the evidence provided to the Police and Crime Needs Assessment, which includes statistical information and survey information, so residents' voices do feature in the priority setting. We know from residents that crime and community safety is important, and in responding to that, there is a risk of identifying too many priorities, so the board could lose focus and impact. So a set of principles were developed to separate out from all that is important what is a priority. And those principles are set out in paragraph 10 on page 2 of the report. So briefly running through the decision making, domestic abuse and serious violence are well established areas of work, but are subject to new duties that the board has a role in overseeing. Prevent, which is part of the counter-terrorism agenda, is an established programme of work, but there is still development work to do, including looking at how district and borough councils engaged in this activity. High harm offences, which is modern slavery. And again, there is an established programme of work, but the board needs to be confident that the cases across the county are being identified, they're being referred to the right places, and the people involved are getting the support that they need. Fraud and cybercrime has been a work programme for the board for a few years now, but during the pandemic, incidents increased, so the subsequent risks and the impact of these crime types led to this being escalated to priority in this agreement. The cross-cutting issues are also set out in the agreement as they impact across most areas of crime and community safety, so you can't tackle the named priorities without having regard to these matters as well. Then finally, the priorities being led at local level by community safety partnerships are set out, and there may be other local priorities in each area in addition to these, depending on the needs of that area. There is a crossover between what is led locally and what is picked up at county-wide level. For example, if you look at burglary, the local actions include situational responses such as target hardening, but at a county-wide level, the work is done with the repeat offenders and also one of the drivers of burglary, which is substance misuse. In addition, the Safer Nottinghamshire Board meetings are structured to enable the community safety partnerships to escalate any issues to enable a county-wide response to be considered to what's happening in their locality, and one example of that is around car cruising. Having agreed the priorities for inclusion in the Community Safety Agreement, the regulations require that the agreement also sets out how the activity to address their priorities will be coordinated. This is the focus of the partnership development work currently being undertaken by the board, which is being led by the Ashfield District Council Chief Executive, who is a board member and also chair of the Mansfield and Ashfield Community Safety Partnership Joint Strategic Group. The results of this work to develop a new operating model for the board will be described in part 2 of the Community Safety Agreement, which will be available later in the year. What this work will do is identify the specific contribution that the board can make to each of the priorities and be very intentional and transparent about where it can add value. This slide sets out the partnerships and boards that are already involved in the delivery arrangements for the priorities that the Safe Nottinghamshire Board already has a direct relationship with and needs to coordinate the activity across. Most of these have been established in response to a particular requirement. So, for example, domestic abuse and substance misuse, the partnership arrangements are statutory requirements. The Serious Violence Reduction Board was required as part of the funding received into the county and city to set up a serious violence reduction partnership, and the Prevent Board was established recently following Home Office guidance. So the Safe Nottinghamshire Board and the Community Safety Agreement exist in a complex landscape, and through the partnership development work currently happening, the board will clearly articulate in the second part of the agreement where in this landscape it will be positioned to add value and make a clear contribution to the priorities. And it is clear from the work that's been done so far that there is a role for the board in coordinating across all those groups that were shown earlier. And the board wants to strip back its ways of working to really focus in on that. And that includes connections with boards that operate in the wider landscape, some of which are listed on the slide. And so if you consider one of the priorities for the board is domestic abuse, that speaks to the agendas of all the boards listed. So we need to ensure operational coherence across that whole landscape. The second to last slide. So to give some kind of sense of timescales for the production of the second part of the agreement and the new operating models, there's two key dates shown on the slide. Firstly, at the end of this month, the board member leads for each of the priorities are meeting to finalise the delivery plan and to set out the aims, performance management arrangements, operational coherence and specific focus for the board for each of those priorities. And that will be taken to the Safe Nottinghamshire Board in September for consideration. And then feeding into that meeting, next week there's a meeting with all the district and borough council community safety managers to discuss how we can work together better across the community safety partnerships and the Safer Nottinghamshire Board to deliver all the requirements in a more streamlined way at an operational level. I do need to be clear though that whilst the development work is taking place, activity across all the partnership is happening through the boards and the partnerships shown in the earlier slide. The final slide. So from a county council perspective, the importance of this work is reflected in the Nottinghamshire Plan under Ambition 3, which sets out a specific commitment to leading and coordinating the work of the Safer Nottinghamshire Board. And this commitment is what's driving our role in the partnership development activity to ensure the arrangements are effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm now going to open the floor up to debate and questions. Somebody got any questions to ask? I got Councillor Callaghan just got there ahead of Councillor Oliver, so.
Thank you for that. This council passed a motion put forward by the Labour group on 20th of January relating to the Community Safety Agreement. One of the actions agreed by this council was to report on performance under current strategic priorities outlined in the SNB CSA and review whether those currently assigned to lead on these priorities remain suitable. So the questions were, where is that in this report? Why isn't it acknowledged in this report? Because the actions from January's full council should have been included in this report, and it's unacceptable that they're not. This report is therefore unfinished and needs to come back to this committee. Paragraph 26 refers to the board being aligned with the PCC on areas including strategic assessment, and the board is confident in continuing its current direction of travel. I need to remind members of this scrutiny committee that the strategic lead for reducing reoffending was Commissioner Caroline Henry. the commissioner who has gone on to be found guilty for speeding 5 times in succession. The Labour group said at the time that the PCC is unfit to remain in her role given the convictions, and is certainly unsuitable as the strategic lead for this priority. It will be galling to all residents in Nottinghamshire who have been affected by dangerous driving to hear this. So we'd like an updated version of this report brought back to the subsequent place scrutiny committee meeting, which acknowledges the actions outlined in the motion agreed at January's full council meeting and includes a detailed review of the previous commitments made in the previous CSA and performance during that time. So again, where is it in this report and why isn't it acknowledged in this report? Thank you.
Which of you, Councillor Cotty, do you want to answer that one, or Vicky?
I'm happy for Vicky to respond. Thank you.
Apologies, it should have been acknowledged. The what happened at full council. Operationally, we've addressed that, and one of the other things was about the reporting and the communication strategy. I think it's referenced in the report. That's going to be publicly reporting on how the progress. So I should have included in the report, and apologies that didn't happen. In terms of the reviewing the priorities, that all that was taken into consideration as part of the partnership development work. So there was self-assessment done, and also the feedback, such as the motion. In terms of looking at the leads, some of them are kind of almost given because the Police and Crime Commissioner does chair, or her office chairs, the Reducing Reoffending Board. So the SMB can't necessarily dictate who chairs that board. Yeah, sorry. So operationally, that's definitely, the motion has been taken into account of, and we've adapted some of the things we're going to do in because of that. And I should have reflected in the report, so I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. Have you got anything to come back with, Anne, or any further questions, or?
Just basically to be brought back to further scrutiny, basically.
Okay. Well,
back to the
yeah. Well, I think we can come back to that at the end after the thing, and I'm sure there'll be a few recommendations that will come out of today's debate. Anyway, Councillor Oliver.
Try now. Sorry if some people can't hear me. I've got a sore throat, so I'll try my best. The one thing is, that is a source of great frustration is the existence of the Police and Crime Commissioner. I just believe that it's not right that we have politicians in charge of police. The police should decide on their own priorities without political interference, and we would back the position being scrapped altogether. In the last Police and Crime Commissioner election, less than 1 of 3 people bothered to vote in Nottinghamshire. Whether you contact the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, you are told that because it's an operational matter, it is not the Commissioner Henry's responsibility, which I find bizarre. She is there to hold the Chief Constable to account, and we are told to scrutinise the performance of the police. We are also told yet that there is little evidence of this ever happening. Yet our Police and Crime Commissioner earns approximately $86,000 a year, more than an MP makes who assists with the law. Yet, looking in this document, and it tells you that the Police and Crime Commissioners are not a responsible authority in legislation, so are not a statutory member of the Safer Nottinghamshire Board. However, there is a duty of mutual cooperation. What does that even mean, is what we are asking. In Eastwood, residents are still bitterly complaining about access to policing. Many say that they call police 101 without success. I've been a victim of that myself. If they get through at all to the non-emergency number, they wait for days for a response, if at all receiving one, which is an increasing issue within our communities. Our police station on Nottingham Road in Eastwood, it doesn't have a front desk, doesn't have a face, doesn't have... If you ask any resident in Eastwood who are even their local police officers, I doubt they'd even tell you. Long gone are the days of bobbies walking the streets. Long gone are the days of you walking down the street and saying hello to your local police officer. The reality is that if anybody's asked whether they feel safer on the streets of places like Eastwood since 2021, they'll tell you a different story. What the public want is a real action. Bobby's on the beat, visible policing that has been missing for years, a proper police station that is reactive to the concerns of the people. No amount of lists of priorities seem to impact the front line. The reality is that we are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds for a police and crime commissioner and her office with no or next to none real power. Ours is not even on the Safer Nottinghamshire board. Would you not agree that scrapping the position and putting the money into the frontline policing would be welcomed by our residents? Is the answer to a safer Nottinghamshire more bobbies on the beat, a service that goes back to basics and that would lead to a safer and better place for everybody? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cotty or Vicky?
Well, thank you, Councillor Oliver, for your comments. This paper is the Community Safety Agreement. It's in line with the Police and Crime Plan 2021-25. I don't recognise everything you say. I do recognise some of what you say. But I think that's where I'll leave it and see where the chairman takes your comments and questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think some of what you said, Councillor Oliver, is sort of outside the scope of what we're talking about here. So we're certainly not here to talk about the Police and Crime Commissioner and whether that role is correct or whatever. I sort of I note your comments and that, but it's outside the scope of what we're here to talk about in some respect. Yep. Come on.
With all due respect, though, we're here to talk about and scrutinise the crime and disorder strategy, which also reflects upon the Police and Crime Commissioner being involved with that, and that is what we are scrutinising from the Independent Alliance. But thank you for your comment, Councillor Moxon.
Yeah, no, thank you. Note that. Next, I had Councillor Eric Kerry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for the presentation and the report. And this is part of the strategic work that's going on in terms of improving community safety and crime in Nottinghamshire. One of the items on page 24 of the papers today, and it is talking about the strategic Nottingham Board communication strategy, which you're working on, I believe, at the moment. So I want to take this opportunity, if I can, to help influence that strategy as you take the work forward, rather than criticising else that's gone on before. And that is it says that it's activity designed to increase public trust and confidence. I'd like to ask if you could consider doing communications on improving or increasing the amount of times that any crimes and antisocial behaviour are reported to the police and local authorities, because they have a shared responsibility for that work, to enable the public to influence the allocation of resources into different areas, and local authorities are responsible for antisocial behaviour to allocate resources into the key areas, and so that when you do your communications, that report it is increased, and so that people are more aware that if they do report it, they will be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you. That's going to be part of the strategy. It's really important that we understand what's happening out there, and we appreciate that it can be confusing for people to know where to report to and who's got the duty to respond. So that will be part of the strategies. But thank you for raising that.
Thank you very much for that. Anything to follow up with, Councillor Kerry? Or okay. Next, I've got Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I think we'd all agree police officers on the ground are the best deterrent. I think we'd all agree with that. And if we look at the figures, in 2010, Nottinghamshire had 2,409 full-time equivalent officers. Today, in 2023, there are 2,407 full-time equivalent officers. So literally, we've got two less. The strategy, can we can we agree that moving forward, that the police officer numbers will still increase, will continue to increase moving forward? I don't know, to be honest with you. We're told by government that they are investing in police, but I can't answer back on that sitting here at this moment. So,
Councillor Smith, you.
I think it's probably worth saying we completely understand, what you've said there, and I would agree. Most people would agree with that, and I suspect the police would probably agree with that. So, more than happy to make sure that is fed back into the board. The police are obviously part of the board, so more than happy to vocalise that to them again.
thank you.
Have you got anything to add? Okay. Next, I've got Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I concentrated actually my comments, and some of them have been made already, so I won't repeat them. Based on paragraph 7, the regulations state that the community safety agreement must identify the county-wide community safety priorities that arise from the strategic assessment and that require escalating to the county level. Ways of coordinating activity across the county to address priorities. Now, most of my constituents, Mr. Chairman, and I suspect actually most people across the county, will concentrate on, the sort of policing aspects of this this subject. And I take the point that this particular scrutiny group will not cover all of those, but that's what the public understands. That's the priorities, and has been alluded to by Councillor Turner. We're still not quite up to the numbers that of police that were in place years ago, and indeed, despite the fact that apart from one or two short, we're back up to the 2010 substantially the figures. The fact is that in parts of my division in Bingham East, Colston, Scraveton, Austin, Granby, they'll never see a police officer on a day-to-day basis. Visible policing in our rural areas is now very few and far between, because, as we know, most of police have been sucked into the city of Nottingham, or at least that's the priorities that the police hierarchy have decided. And so the promise by the Police and Crime Commissioner that she would introduce rural crime teams has not been achieved and not been delivered. And in fact, actually at the time, I was campaigning with Councillor Cotty on that very subject. And we were delivering leaflets promising people that they would have a levelling up, if you like, of rural crime teams. And she hasn't delivered on that. And I'm not expecting Councillor Cotty to know the answer to this, but when is it going to be delivered? Is she going to deliver it? Because if it isn't going to happen, hundreds of thousands of residents who voted for her have been misled and lied to, frankly. And on that basis, and not on this occasion, am I suggesting that we again call for her to resign over her driving behaviour. But I really think she should consider her position by simply not delivering on a key aspect of her platform when she was elected. Thank you.
Well, just before I bring Councillor Cotty in, I mean, it's worth reiterating again. You sort of said it yourself. police and crime commissioners sort of outside the scope of this. I understand your frustrations and everyone's frustrations on it, but it's outside the scope of this meeting and the remit of Councillor Cotty's department. But I'll pass to Councillor Cotty.
Not much else to add to that, Chairman. We're not in that position, but we can take it away and see if there's anything we could do, if that's a requirement. I'm not sure that Councillor Purdue-Horan is correct on all of that, because I'm aware of some rural activity with police, especially to do with farmers, etc., and the rural areas. But I'm no expert, so.
Thank you very much. I got Councillor Wheeler next.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So my question relates to the report, and on page 18 around antisocial behaviour, so following on from my colleague Councillor Kerry. So for me, antisocial behaviour, I think, is actually one of the most underreported crimes, where a lot of people just don't report it, think it happens, as then we know that can actually lead to more serious crimes. The only concern I have with it says that districts will lead on that is to make sure that there is still reporting back to the board itself about what is being done in certain areas. I know that some forces, some internal forces, like for example, Rushcliffe will perhaps do differently to Ashfield, etc. So we just need to have that knowledge coming back to see what's working, what's not. So I think that'd be something to feedback we can to the board. And going to the sort of the neighbourhood crime areas. So I know, for example, in Rushcliffe that we've gone back to more of a officer for each area. So, for example, in my areas, like in Walton, Gamps, I've got dedicated officers now. And again, I don't think that happens elsewhere. So again, feeding that back into how that's working and try to encourage other areas of force to do the same, because that does make an impact. You know, they're doing regular surgeries in the area, chatting to people, and that is making a huge difference in that communication. Again, it's just to make sure that what's been done in perhaps isolation, we can come back to that overall strategic approach that we have. And I've had conversations with the Chief Constable and with the local police inspector about reporting about police resources, and what they've told me in no uncertain terms is it's about the incidents, about what's reported. So what we can do to communicate out there to people, reporting an incident, because it's not going to affect the crime numbers. Crime and incidents, of course, two separate metrics, but when they allocate the resources down to the incident. So if an incident aren't really reported in one certain area, you're not going to get anywhere near the resource you do anywhere else. So again, it's how we can help communicate that message out to people, that it's not just by ringing and reporting it as much as you can, even if you think someone else has, to keep doing that. Because one of the probably dangers within modern Facebook and WhatsApp groups, I get all the time the ones I manage, where 30 people report something on there to say there's an issue, but no one's actually reporting the police. When you actually bring up yourself, get on, no one's reported this to us, we didn't know. So again, it's just how we can perhaps in our role to push that out and as much as possible to make sure that's reflected. Thank you, Jim.
Vicky, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. As was said with Councillor Kerry, the partnership is aware that is an issue, and the antisocial behaviour information is part of the analytical project that the Safe and Ots Board consider when looking at emerging risks. And there will be some issues that are classed as antisocial behaviour that are happening in quite a few areas, and so need to be dealt with across the whole county. Like I mentioned car cruising earlier, there's looking at a county-wide response to that. And in terms of the reporting, we're looking at a lot of the reporting is a lot of the information that the board looks at is police stats, but we also are now looking at how we can get the borough council information into that, because we want people to report to the right places, but then we don't just want to look at part of the picture. So that those conversations are being had now, because we need the whole picture of what's reported to different places brought together to properly know what we're dealing with, and encouraging people to report as well, because not just think or accept things and think things aren't going to get done. We need people to understand it's not just the police that will respond, it may be the district and borough council, it may be from here our youth services. So it's just getting that message, it's not just about the police, it's about those other prevention and early intervention services as well.
Councillor Smith, you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Chairman. Just if I may, yes, Jonathan, you make an absolute solid point there, in that is to some extent almost the purpose of the board. You say about all these different organisations having different techniques, different methods of reporting it, different kind of different techniques and whatever, and the board aims to kind of tie all those together and bring an element of uniformity amongst all these different bodies that are in it. So you do make a good point. And I think, Chairman, it's also probably just worth a open plea, as I'm sure John will make as well, that people need to report incidents. Councillors get fed up of saying to people, report incidents. But if the numbers aren't there, as you know, as councillor colleagues have said, if the numbers aren't there, the police attention isn't there either. So that is an ongoing battle that we have, the police have, and the public have. So please do report any incidents.
Thank you very much. Always good advice. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there's a telling comment on page 23 when you look under the part 2, delivering the CSA. And in the second paragraph, it says the Safe and Knots Board sits within a very complex partnership. And I don't know whether you and colleagues are like me, but you sometimes lose the will a little bit when you keep reading about partnerships, because who knows who does what, and I think that's what one of the confusing thing is. And we've just heard the comments about the police commissioner this morning, and everyone will have their views about that. But and as has been said, this item is not to scrutinise a crime commissioner. That, I would think, is a job of another group, the crime panel, I would imagine. So, but I understand where we're coming from. But anyway, going back to this. It's good to have this, but in the real world, with the public out there and the businesses that we're all looking after and responsible for, what does it all mean in reality? This what we're doing here today, but also how do we actually measure how effective all this work is? Is it just when you look at the crime figures and what's actually happening, and then how do we know whether it is a result of what this group has done or not, whether crime is going down or going up? And part of the answer there is, I think, is in here. It's also very complicated as to who does what. But I'd be interested to know, how do we sort of review how effective or not we've been on this? And if I may, just while I've got the floor, to comment about the Rural Crime Initiative, and Councillor Cotti mentioned this. In fairness, far be it from me to defend the police and the crime commissioner, but a few months ago, certainly in my part of the world, in our part of the county, there was a big initiative launched by the crime commissioner and the various local inspectors and sergeants and police at a farm. Where all the councillors were invited, and I think most of us went along, and it was really genuinely interesting. And I know the feedback from the farmers I know and in the rural parts is it seems to be working. So I think there's maybe a communication thing going on there that might need to be beefed up a bit, which is always an issue, I know. But anyway, but really, just how do we measure how effective this is going to be? Thank you.
Thank you. Vicky, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you. That being able to be very clear in answering that question is what's driven the partnership development work. So that at the meeting later this month, we will have a delivery plan, or the board will have a delivery plan that sets out for each priority. These are the aims, these are targets, and this is a very specific task that the SMB will do within that complex landscape. The very specific role for the SMB, because we need to be able to say this is very specifically what that board does. So we'll have that plan hopefully later this month, ratified in September, and then we'll be able to be much more transparent about this is the very particular value that the board has added. So we want to get right down to naming this is what it does, the particular activities, and then the performance management framework around that.
To answer your question, thank you. So next I got Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, Councillor Cotti, I welcome you to this room today, because you are the first gentleman that has sat opposite me in these committees that has been absolutely, and I think Vicky used the right word, transparent. So I thank you for that. But I would just like to go back to your answer to Councillor Francis's question. I was just wondering, you said you were going to take it back to them. Who would we be taking it back to, and what will we be taking it back to? Just so we have a repeating pattern of things saying that things are going to happen, but we never say how or when they're going to happen and when we're going to come back and look at what's going to happen. So from a scrutiny point of view, I'm asking yourself, what is it you're going to take back? And when are we going to hear back about it? Thank you, Chair.
So I am presuming, as it's my first time here, that your chairman will be deciding with you and the rest of the members of what we take back.
Yeah, so if I could just interject, so that's part of what the recommendations that will come out of the of today. So we'll finish off the debate, and then we'll go on to the recommendations. If anyone wants to put recommendations forward, that's great, and we can give recommendations to John Cotty and his team to go away and do something specifically, and then that will go on to the work programme, and myself and the vice chair and along with the officers will decide what the work programme is going forward, and that also comes from the overview committee as well. Decide what the priorities are for the work programme. So that's the mechanics of how that will work going forward. Next, I've got Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered for some clarification of the 5 priorities. Are there any rankings within those? Is there a priority within the priorities?
Good question, Vicky.
No, there's no priorities within the priorities. They've got equal footing.
Simple answer to a simple question. As they often are. Any other questions from members before we go on to the recommendations? No? Okay, thank you very much. So if we move now on to recommendations, so I think a few of them have come out that Noel's been noting down. So Noel, do you want to cover that?
Yes, I'll look to tidy up that, and then we can have a discussion as to whether that's captured accurately the thinking. The first recommendation that you would normally have in these circumstances is that the report be noted. We would be looking, because this is a statutory requirement, we'd be looking to have a further progress report on the delivery of the strategy, and the initial thinking is that would come to the equivalent meeting in the year's time. So that recommendation would read that a further progress report on the delivery of the crime and disorder strategy be received at the July 2024 meeting of the Police Select Committee in his role as the Council's statutory Crime and Disorder Committee as defined by the Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny Regulations Act. And then this is the nub of capturing discussion today, that the following issues raised by committee and its consideration of the report on the delivery of the crime and disorder strategy be progressed, and then the recommendations that we now agree on taking forward. The key one that I picked up on in discussion was in respect of improving communication with residents in order to ensure that their reporting crimes and incidents are done both appropriately and that residents feel that they're being listened to. So I can find a form of words of that to sign off. There were also issues raised in respect of rural crime and whether the committee wishes to have further insight on rural crime performance and focus on that in any update. And I'm open to hear what else others would have had to say.
Okay, so has anybody, Councillor Callaghan, straight in there.
Just obviously the recommendation that I asked for was an updated version of this report brought back to the subsequent Place Committee meeting, which acknowledges the actions outlined in the motions agreed in January's full council meeting and includes a detailed review of the previous commitments made in the previous CSA and performance during that time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. Do you want to accept that?
Yeah. Is there any other recommendations that people want to throw in there before we take all these recommendations? Okay, so let's take them in turn. So sorry, Noel, I know you're busy trying to write that one down. But let's go back to the original recommendation, which is that one there.
Yeah.
So that's a recommendation about firstly noting that this report's come to the committee today, and also that statutorily a report will be updated and brought to the committee in a year's time. So I'll propose that recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Callaghan, thanks very much. All those in favour of that recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then, so that was this recommendation. Just want to clarify that one again, Noel. Sorry.
Right, and this was in respect of improving communication with residents to ensure that reported crimes and incidents of antisocial behaviour will be both reported appropriately and to ensure that residents feel that they're being listened to. As I say, I'd need to tidy up the wording of that.
Okay.
Is that?
I'll propose that. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Callaghan, thank you very much. All those in favour of that recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you. And then I think the final recommendation was the one that Councillor Callaghan suggested, which was about updating this report to take into account the motion that was at full council. I'm just sort of paraphrasing basically what you said, but that was basically what the recommendation was. So I'll propose that. I have a seconder for that. Councillor Callaghan, yeah, well, there we go. Second your own motion. Yeah, no, anything goes. All those in favour of that recommendation? That's it. Is there anything else on this subject before we finish? No? Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Cotty, and to Vicky and to Councillor Smith for attending this morning and giving us that presentation. So, right, we'll swiftly move on to, I've lost a sheet of paper. The next one is item number 7, which is the progress report on the Household Waste Recycling Centre strategic review. So I will, in Councillor Clark's absence, I will ask Councillor Mike Adams, who's the Deputy Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, to present the report for us this morning. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Press the right button, always helps. Yes, as Councillor Moxon says, I'm the Deputy Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, and I'll be presenting today while Neil is on other council business. Mick Allen, who is over my shoulder to my right, is the Group Commissioner for Place and will be assisting on this item and will facilitate a better understanding of where we are with regards to this. So initially, I'll hand over to Mick.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adams. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll cover just a few bits during the report. I think a number of people will have seen quite a lot of this in the past, because it's just reiterating how we got to where we are in terms of reviewing the recycling centre network. Obviously, the work that was commissioned through a consultancy called ACOM last year was very much around reviewing the current network in light of changes to legislation and strategy coming out of central government, mainly the National Resources and Waste Strategy 2018 and the Environment Act, as well as assessing and understanding housing growth and changes in housing networks across the county over the last few years, and obviously coming forward as well. The work was actually commissioned a while ago, as I say. Unfortunately, because it very much links to the Resources and Waste Strategy and that Environment Act, we haven't yet got a central government steer on what that policy is going to say and when it's going to be implemented. There are a number of areas within that strategy that were sounded at the time and are likely to have a significant impact on recycling centres and obviously curbside collections operated by the district councils. That includes things such as extended producer responsibility, where manufacturers, retailers are going to be more responsible for the waste they produce. Consistency in curbside collections, so the type and materials that are collected at the curbside, and particularly just to flag on that, one of the suggestions there was around free curbside green waste collections, and many of our recycling centres currently take around 50% of the waste through the gates is garden waste. So therefore, obviously, if those free green waste collections come into play, that's a significant change in the amount of waste going through our sites and the need and the obligations that we placed on the district council and themselves to do different things. And there's also things around deposit return schemes as well, which is very much around paying a deposit on plastics, bottles, etc., to try and capture some of those. That has less impact on the recycling centres, but it certainly does have a significant impact on curbside collections provided by the districts. And again, the service that we provide at the recycling centres has to be complementary and has to work alongside of those services effectively. Government also just published in the last couple of weeks the outcome of a consultation that they did do only a year ago, actually. So the one they did 3 years ago hasn't yet come out. One they did last year has, which is around charging for DIY and inert waste at recycling centres. And the government has proposed that the law is changed, because at the moment home-generated DIY waste is not household waste within the meaning of the Environment Act. Therefore, it doesn't have to be taken at the recycling centres free of charge. They've now decided that it will have to be taken free of charge at recycling centres. So again, that's another change that's going to potentially alter flows into the sites, because whilst Nottinghamshire doesn't charge, Nottingham City does, Leicestershire does, and Derbyshire have talked about it but haven't actually progressed that. So again, I'm just trying to make a case for, there's quite a lot of flexibility still in the system, in the waste system, and we're not getting the certainty around stuff. One thing just quickly to pull out as well from here is that as part of the work that has been done so far, around 98% of Nottingham's population lives within a 20-minute drive of their nearest recycling centre. Now, there are no national standards, but the National Assessment of Civic Community Sites, which is a group that looks at through a number of professional bodies that looks at what those standards should be, they suggest a drive time of 20 minutes in urban areas and 30 minutes in rural areas. So actually, given that 98% of our population, including the rural areas, have that coverage 20 minutes so already, means that we've got really good coverage within our recycling centre network at the moment. And that's also reflected into the customer satisfaction work that Veolia do. Once a year they do a customer satisfaction survey on the sites, and the results of that are recently out, and again that was 98% satisfaction, very satisfied or satisfied with the network as it currently stands. I think it's also important to pull out the fact we've got 12 sites. That's a lot of sites compared to our neighbouring authorities, but actually that network hasn't necessarily been planned and developed in a structured way. A lot of the sites are old, I think it's fair to say, and were actually constructed in and around former landfills or other waste facilities. Therefore, they're actually located where it's convenient to put them at the time and sat within a planning policy at the time, but doesn't actually necessarily comply with what would currently be planning policy or actually best practice, and actually aren't necessarily well sited for access from the major highway network. So there are a number of constraints associated with having an old network of sites across the county. It's also worth flagging as well, just to be clear, that any changes to the household waste recycling centre network or the range of materials that were collected would have to be subject to a negotiation with Veolia, who are our long-term partner on the Waste PFI contract, but actually also would need approval from DEFRA and His Majesty's Treasury as part of the PFI conditions, because the contract covers all of those sites, and a number of financial benefits have accrued to us over a long period of time through those arrangements with central government funding to improve the recycling centres as they currently stand. I think it's really important though to flag what I'm trying to pull out of this is actually a bit like crime situation. It's very complex, a range of partners in play, ourselves and the districts, as well as all those national policy drivers, and particularly things like the Environment Agency and their permitting regime and their operational regime. There are a significant number of complex interfaces, some of which we can't control, and unfortunately, because we can't control those, we've been unable to finalise the work that's been done over the last year or so, because we're still a number of things are outstanding. We would obviously, as officers, welcome engagement from members in working through some of those complexities and understanding the drivers for change that might be there, so that we can actually recommend a network and solutions for household waste recycling centres that complement curbside services and actually also deliver a long-term sustainable solution for the county that's affordable. So engaging with members to move that forward would be very helpful to us. A couple of recommendations there in the report, Chair, and obviously I'll let you and members have a discussion and see where that takes us. Thank you.
Councillor Adams, do you just want to finish?
Thank you. Yes, I just want to reaffirm the point that Mick's made there around engagement with residents and arguably in the elected representatives of their residents, and obviously on this committee specifically to look at this is your good selves. And I think it's really important that that feedback is taken into this process and actually helps form what we do moving forward. I'm very new to this committee, as you very well know. I'm not sure what vehicles you have in place to enable that, but I think that's got to be the way that we ensure that the residents that are going to be using those facilities, and fundamentally they've got to be customised to them, is done in the right way and with their thoughts and their activities that they have in their lives are ensured that we are fulfilling those as representatives of local residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And I think the obvious, to me anyway, the obvious answer to that would answer that would be to have a task and finish group of this committee, so that sort of group of people from different groups can come together and sort of discuss all the issues and come up with a plan over the course of 2 or 3 meetings and come up with some recommendations to go forward on this. Otherwise, we're just going to go round in circles with this over and over again. But happy to open up the debate this morning on it. Got Councillor Upton there first.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say a few words as a Radcliffe-on-Trent resident and for my Radcliffe-on-Trent division residents who some years ago used the Langer tip, which is now closed. It was closed for the former Labour administration. And there is a frustration, really, that it's never been replaced. And we now, generally speaking, come to the West Bridgeford Household Recycling Centre, which has its problems, to say the least, in terms of accessibility, particularly at peak times. But be that as it may, I personally think, with all the issues that's just been outlined by the officer, we should pause this review. We should pause it until whenever the government publish the Environment Act, because there's too many ifs and buts and what ifs. I get a huge amount of casework, if not daily, weekly, from my residents. What about curbside glass recycling? What about food waste? What about this plastic? What about Tetra Pak? On and on it goes. I just respond now to everyone, we are waiting the Environment Act. I don't know when that will be. Sooner than later, I hope. But I recommend we should pause this work, because it's pointless going round and round in circles, year in, year out. It all hinges on the government. Thank you.
Well, I mean, if we wait for that, and if you and I don't know when that's going to be enacted, we could be waiting for a very long time. And in the meantime, residents aren't getting a service that they want. So that's why I personally think a task and finish group would be the best option to that. But I take your point on board. I don't think there's anything for you guys to come back on that. Councillor Callaghan.
Yes, you stole my thunder. Because I'd actually wrote down maybe we should have a task and finish group. Yeah, so that's cross-party working, you see. So, but coming to paragraph 8, and I think the officer has sort of answered some of this. It refers to further work required includes resolving commercial issues within the council's waste PFI partner. You know, can you sort of say what some of those issues are? You know, and what do they relate to? Does this in any way relate to our PFI partner's parent company, Viola's ongoing work in Russia? at a time when lots of other countries have ceased business with Russia, either voluntary or whatever. So that them are two questions. Thank you.
The commercial issues generally around the nature of material going through the sites, because we pay for some materials, the county council pays direct in effect for disposal, because of the model that they use to operate the sites, which is known as totting. It's an old-fashioned name, but in effect, the site licensees collect materials and sell them. They sell them through flea markets, etc., to raise money. So if we change the way that materials are dealt with on the sites, that changes the way that people need to be paid. So that's a reference to commercial stuff. So things like green waste is very simple. We pay a gate fee, we pay haulage to move it, and that's fine. But other things that come through. So one of the big areas for money making, as you'll understand, because of the number of people that do it on the street corners, is the scrap metals. So scrap metals at the moment obviously generate significant income for the operators because it's valuable stuff. If that's not coming through the sites, because extended producer responsibility means that the manufacturers are being responsible for taking that back. So already you can take your things back to your curries or whatever, but they charge you. One of the plans was that was going to become a manufactured responsibility, therefore it'd be free. But that means that people won't need to take things to the recycling centre. So instantly the operators are losing a significant chunk of cash, and that's the subcontractors, not the Veolia element of it. So there are a number of those things. Almost any of all of those waste streams, because they interact, will have an impact on the financial viability of the operation, either for the subcontractors or Veolia themselves. More potentially the subcontractors, but because they are Veolia subcontractors, they have to look at how that works. And I know we've responded previously around questions about Veolia's involvement in Russia, and it's not really for me to comment. But as far as I'm, my position on that is that Veolia have complied with all the legislation around that, and their current position and their stance corporately is very much that they provide services to the public sector and therefore the public in Russia and Ukraine. So it absolutely doesn't reference this. Those businesses are very separate in the way that they operate.
Okay. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I think that based on Councillor Upton's point, the main thing is, like I say, we're still waiting on this white paper, and so we can put all the issues together we like. But as I say, until we find exactly what we are supposed to be recycling and disposing of, it does make the job a lot harder. So I have a lot of sympathy for the office on this. I think any task and fears group, we effectively need to have the two options, two scenarios, don't we? Based on, are we going to have this white paper based on what we think it is, and we aren't? So what we're going to do based on those two scenarios? Because otherwise, like I say, we're just going to be second guessing in terms of what comes back. But I will make the wider point as well about we talked about the old sites. The one in West Bridger, which shows sort of Rushcliffe. I mean, even if you were to have a second site, I don't think the current site can cope. So that's why it's important with the review that we are looking at all these sites, see where we can upgrade and change, because as Mick points out, from where we started these sites was based on a whole different ball game in terms of what was being recycled and where the population of Nottinghamshire was, and obviously in a different place. I mean, take example, Rushcliffe, West Bridge. We have 13,000 new houses just over the next 10 years. So that makes a hell of a difference in terms of traffic flow going through the area. The roads can't change because it's in a residential area, so you can't do anything with the access. So it's really important to look at it, but also the responsibility we have to the finances, because as already been pointed out, there's a big financial change potentially with the credits you get from the government. So again, we just need to be absolutely certain as well what the government is saying, because it could have a big impact on any decision we make going forwards if we're going to lose significantly out from that. So I think getting that certainty back as well based on scenarios is going to be key before any decisions are made. Thank you.
Councillor Adams, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a smaller or sort of wider point in some ways around the way waste has changed as well. Waste is very much now viewed as an asset, whereas in years gone by it was seen as a pitfall to society. Whereas now, we are able, and it was mentioned earlier, Mick mentioned around metals on streets, they are actually generating income, and no doubt, again, those waste streams will continue to change as we look to recycle things like solar panels and lithium batteries from phones and from cars and all that sort of stuff. So I think what what's really important is what's built into this review is that fundamental view of a future proof, and that there is a facility in there, an ability to enable those waste facilities to take on different arms, if you like, of waste as they go forward. So, you know, building that in would maybe help that group plan, but with a sort of backup as well along the way, depending on changes, and also food waste, which currently is being anaerobically digested and turned into gas, which is obviously a very big industry. And again, as Mick's pointed out, in regards to food waste curbside collection, that's only going to grow and extend. So important that we take those things into account as well. Thank you.
Got Councillor Williamson next.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask that when you are doing the review, you could look at disabled accessibility at the tips, because my local tip is certainly not accessible to disabled people, and the staff aren't particularly helpful either. So I tend to go to a tip in Derbyshire rather than my local one, because it's a lot easier for me to be able to use it and use facilities. So I would ask that if not all sites are looked at, particularly the one at Gilbrook, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly come back. I understand that absolutely, and any new sites, and if you see the newer sites that we've got in the county are fully accessible. So that's something that obviously would be built into any new site to make it DDA compliant, etc. But we want the sites to be accessible to people. We don't want people to need to ask for assistance, and we know we've got a number of sites that are worse than others in that respect. We can certainly have a look again at Gilbrook, at the Kimberley site, but I'll be honest, we've had all of the sites assessed through our disability access officer in the past, and that's why a number of the sites do have in theory support from the staff. But again, I absolutely take that point that some places have more proactive staff in dealing with that than others. Therefore, we only do try and provide a standard level of service, but it is always a challenge, and we do have turnovers of staff, so they've got a constant program of training. But actually, we don't really want to have a situation where we provide assistance to people, because we want them to be able to use those sites fully anyway. So that will be built into any future sites. Okay.
Thank you, Mick. And all I would add to that is that on the assumption that the committee approves a task and finish group, just get involved in it and put those views forward within the group. That's all I would urge you to do, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Purdue-Horan next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was puzzled with this report, because I kind of come away with the conclusion that we seem to be treading on water at the moment and going nowhere. My understanding is that in January this year, a detailed operational strategic recommendations have been drawn up by consultants. Then in March, we were told, this committee was told, that the review was complex. And here we are in June, no further forward. And I'm sorry that despite, I'm sure, Councillor Adams' optimism, other colleagues in adult social care, for example, are awaiting the government to give direction in that field. We see from the national news that the government's strategy for controlling immigration is now currently in confusion. So I'm not entirely confident that by the time we have a general election sometime in 2024, this issue, the Environment Bill, is going to be resolved. I'm sure that's not at the top of the list of the government's priorities, despite the fact it is an extremely important subject. Mr. Chairman, I'm not so sure that most of Rushcliffe are less than 20 minutes away from the tip. I suppose if you drive like Lewis Hamilton down the A52 from Bingham East Division, you might just get there. But what they would encounter by the time they get to Rugby Road is a queue that would sometimes go past the traffic lights at the Loughborough Road junction, and a visit to the inadequate West Bridgford tip these days is a day out without the seaside or the ice cream. Mr. Chairman, this administration has misled Rushcliffe residents by just pushing the can down the road. And whilst I accept that it's up to the government to enforce, to introduce the regulatory framework, of course, I think within the existing rules, we could have been exploring other options to provide a service to our residents. How is it? And you know, in the recent elections, it was the number two issue certainly in the Bingham East area. How is it that we can be less than 10 minutes down the road from Bottisford, which does have a tip under the Leicestershire County Council scheme, or indeed in the south of Rushcliffe, they are probably no more than 10 minutes away from the Loughborough facilities, of which there are more than one. And so why haven't we, two Conservative-led administrations, been able to cooperate and form a partnership? I hear today for the first time that in fact it seems we may have a partnership with Derbyshire if one or two of our residents are going over that way. So, you know, no serious effort has been put into increasing recycling rates for our residents, and I'm obviously been banging the drum about us leading, and me being included, inadvertently misleading my constituents by promising a new recycling facility in Rushcliffe, which was dashed when unfortunately there was a change of leadership. So I have some questions, Mr. Chairman. Why has this council repeatedly promised to deliver the results of the recycling review and failed to do so? What communication have you had with the government? When do you finally expect to reveal the results of the review, and how much has it cost so far in officers' time and consultants? What communication do we have with neighbouring authorities, particularly Leicestershire, about the possibility of using their facilities, which, as I said, are very close to many of our residents? And why did this committee not take this as a standalone item, as suggested by Councillor Wheeler and agreed by this committee previously? Thank you.
Councillor Adams, do you want to respond?
I'm going to just say one thing and then pass over to Mick, and that's obviously government policy is government policy. We have no way of guiding that in terms of going through the process. As we all know, government processes take process. You can feed into it, which is what I believe is happening. I'll just pass over to Mick.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I appreciate frustrations around West Bridgford, because it is a challenge for us as well, officers, and it's a challenge for Veolia as an operator and their subcontractors. We've been doing some work around that site and traffic analysis and looking at some remodelling work there. That's not yet reported back, but we know the initial indications are that the queues are certainly when the traffic survey has been done, aren't as bad as some days, and we do appreciate at times when it's really busy, particularly around the Easter bank holidays, etc. It was busy, and as were most of our sites, as were various other things, including probably Asda itself, I guess. Particularly around the conversation with the partners, with our neighbouring authorities. We do talk to Derbyshire and Leicestershire, and more about because they talk to us about them wanting to use our sites, because we've got significantly more sites than they have. Derbyshire, I think, have got 9 now. Leicestershire have got a significant number, but places like Butler and Loughborough aren't open 7 days a week. They're not open 12 hours a day like ours. They're closed midweek. A lot of the sites close at 6. Derbyshire sites close at 6. So if you look at the number of hours of service we provide in Nottinghamshire, is substantially more than any of our neighbouring authorities. So we have had conversations with them in the past around cross-border flows and how to equitably share costs associated with that, because these things do cost a lot of money to run, and we've not been able to get to a sensible conclusion around that. The study itself, the work that's been done, that's been paused with ACOM. There was a budget approved for that work, which has been just about expended. But obviously, as officers, we deal with this as our day job. That's part of our role is to try and manage this. And we've had numerous conversations over many years with partners at Rushcliffe Borough Council, and Councillor Upton been involved in some of those in one of his other roles many years ago, about trying to find an alternative site for West Bridgeford. And it's a challenge. We're in an area here where land is at a premium price. Most landowners don't really want a new recycling centre on their land. They want to sell it for housing or high-level industrial or commercial operations. So actually finding sites that are appropriately allocated, and we're in an area again with significant proportions of Rushcliffe in the Greenbelt. So there's some real challenges around identifying sites to either support and supplement West Bridgeford or replace West Bridgeford. So we continue to do that work. We're in constant dialogue with Councillor Clark around that, and he, like anyone else, wants us to resolve that situation as quickly as possible. But it's not easy, and as we've said before, it's a high cost, significant costs associated with relocating sites, operating sites. At the moment, our network coverage is very good. I'll repeat that again. Whilst we have individual sites that have problems, and absolutely West Bridgeford is one of those. A place like Mansfield, we know we have queues at Mansfield, we know we have issues at Retford. We have sometimes issues at Kirkby as well, because of the way containers have to be swapped over. We have got an ageing network of sites, but the newer ones, places like Newark and Calverton, suffer those problems significantly less and are much more accessible as well. So we continue to work through that to try and make that right. It is frustrating that we haven't been able to conclude things, but as we've said, and as the report points out, and as Councillor Upton said as well, until we get some certainty around some of those strategic issues, and actually what the law is going to tell us we have to provide at the curbside as well as through the recycling centres, and what capital and revenue costs that's going to generate for us and operators, it's very difficult to make a long-term plan. And it would be nice if we could have here's what we do if resource and waste strategy is implemented plan, as well as a what if it isn't plan. But actually there's any number of variations in between. A lot of those are really complex and interrelated. So things around extended producer responsibility, the things around green waste, that curbside food waste collection, which actually is quite a simple but very expensive strategy from central government around implementing that, but actually that then impacts particularly around what our district partners can provide as well, because that's going to be a significant drain on resources for them. So that will have all other impacts on how they provide their bulky waste services, whether they can do those at a charge, whether they do them free. So all those services are really complex and interrelated. And I can't say anything other than, yes, it is really difficult, it's really messy, and it would have been lovely for us if as part of the work that was done by, as part of the resources and waste strategy that went out and did the consultations around the changes, said, yes, this is what we decided and legislated for it. And then we could actually have taken that with a bit of certainty in terms of establishing that model of future operation for us. But we're not in that position. We are in a really complex place, and one that, as a local authority, clearly we don't want to be committed into changes to our network, be that new sites, remodelling, etc., until we know that that can be future-proofed and can be affordable for us.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, Councillor, you're on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I absolutely appreciate the frustration of everybody in the departments relevant to this. We know where the lead cabinet member is. He's obviously with other councillors in Bournemouth, and it's the LGA conference, I think, is an important opportunity for councillors and officers to meet up from other areas and to discuss important policy considerations. And I would urge the administration to take advantage of perhaps an opportunity. I only learnt today that Bottisford is closed during the midweek. I don't know if Loughborough is open at other times, but I'm sure our residents would appreciate all efforts to look at the possibility of partnership working with neighbourhood authorities. And I would encourage Councillor Adams to get on that phone this afternoon to his colleague, Councillor Clark, to urge him to also have conversations this evening over a drink with his Leicestershire colleagues, and to try and examine ways that we could cooperate as neighbours. That's what I would urge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Adams, do you want to come back on that?
Just to reaffirm the importance of this task and finish group you're talking about, I think that sounds like exactly the place to feed all this into, and then we can take all that back out and act from there.
Yep, thank you very much. Anything else from anybody before we go on to recommendations? Okay, so I think the main recommendations are to note the progress of the Household Waste Recycling Centre strategic review, and also to set up a task and finish group of the select committee. So I will propose that. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Callaghan, thank you very much. All those in favour of that recommendation? That's unanimous. Are there any other recommendations anybody wishes to put forward? Oh, yeah.
Chairman, you combined the two together there, didn't you, on a vote? I thought you were doing them separately.
No, well, I didn't. But I mean, the part of it was only to note it. So
I support the first. I don't support the second.
okay, all right. Well, if you'd like me to split it, and we can, so that you can be noted, then I'm happy to do that. So I'll start that again then. So the recommendation is to note the progress of the Household Waste Recycling Centre strategic review. So I would second the Councillor Callaghan. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then the second recommendation is to set up a tax and finish group to go away and discuss areas where this can be improved, and to give ideas to the officers to go away with. Do I have a seconder for that one? And Councillor Callaghan again, thank you. All those in favour? All those against? One, and no abstentions. That is duly noted. Just a suggestion in terms of determine the scope. Yeah. So thank you, Noel. So the chairman and so myself and the vice chairman, in consultation with officers, will create a scope that will determine the work of the task and finish working group, and then I'm sure we'll email out to all members and asking for volunteers to go on the task and finish group. As is usual, it doesn't have to be people off of this select committee if you feel that there's somebody more appropriate to go on it out of your groups, but that will be in the coming days and weeks or so. So thank you very much. Okay, so we will move on now to item number 8, which is the response to the recommendations from the scrutiny review of concessionary travel. Councillor Mike Adams is going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, Gary Wood, who is the Group Manager for Transport and Highways for Place, will be assisting me on this item. And Gary is right behind me. So over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so the report basically sets out the Cabinet members' response to the recommendations, and this was a paper I think that originally came to Place Select Committee in March, and then we had some task and finish groups. Sorry, not March, December last year, and then we had a series of task and finish group meetings, and came up with these recommendations, and the responses are as set out in the report, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. And I think what this has proved is this is sort of the first one that's come back after the completion of a task and finish group and gone to the cabinet member and come back. All the recommendations of the task and finish group have been accepted. I think this is a great example of how task and finish groups can work really well across the political divides and come up with some really well reasoned and thought out recommendations to put forward, which have all been accepted. So just a big thank you to those people that are involved in the task and finish group from myself. Has anybody else got any questions or comments about it? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Wow. Firstly, I was sat in the previous committee when I think it was one of my first committees actually when this came up, and I'm going to reiterate what I said there, but I'm going to link it back even further for you to the concessionary bus passes. I think it's really important. This council claims that it is concerned about buses. Yet only yesterday we received confirmation that the council has turned down my notice of motion to the next full council meeting in July. This was to put a time frame on the ambition to connect every community to a bus and to extend the scope and nature of the bus review carried out with the county councillors a few months ago, and they did this for surplus reasons and is, in my view, creating a democratic deficit. The reason that I'm bringing this up and linking it back to the concessionary is that the council, in my opinion, is quite frankly lazy and scared of reasoned debate, not just from councillors, but they don't want to consult the public either. It's important when we discuss concessionary fares, Chairman, to look at the existing provision. Everyone knows that concessionary fares are irrelevant to many if they do not have reasonable access to public transport. You can't give a 17-year-old on a birthday a car without his keys. Okay? That's why we welcome the stated ambition from the current leader of the council, released earlier this year, that every community would have access to a bus or other form of public transport. That is certainly not the case for large parts of Eastwood, which is the area which I look after, and the people of Eastwood will be incredibly angry that our request for a debate on bus services has been turned down. The third of residents in Eastwood with no access to a bus will be insulted that their concessionary bus pass is almost irrelevant. I believe this council has absolute no interest in social mobility, and quite frankly, no one believes a word they say anymore. Thank you, Chair.
So firstly, I'll before moving on to anybody else, I will say that this committee's got no responsibility at all for whether a motion goes through to full council. I have no idea why it was rejected if it was, and can't possibly comment on that. That is not in our remit. The second thing I will say is that people were involved in the task and finish group. Those people that came along contributed to it very well. It's notable that the Independent Alliance members, nobody participated from that group. So that was a big opportunity to be able to feed into the concessionary travel So it's a little bit of a shame that now at the 11th hour you're potentially throwing in some other ideas that could have been thrown in at the time. So that's
just a point of order. It wasn't an 11th hour. It was put into the last meeting,
no,
which was around concessionary travel.
You're throwing in ideas now at this meeting that in your response.
With all due respect, Chair, it was thrown in at the previous meeting and was not allowed to be said by yourself, as you said it was irrelevant, although it was related to concessionary travel. So with all due respect, Chair, I believe you're wrong on that matter.
Okay, well, I don't think I am, but okay. As I say, I reiterate the fact no independent alliance members took part in the task and finish group, and that was the big opportunity to be able to put forward ideas to the cabinet member, all of which were accepted. So that was the big opportunity that was missed. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I think it's inappropriate to say this now, but the point's been raised about basically bringing to sorry, well, it's right here. The monetary officer made a decision based on motions by the sound of it, which again we don't know because again that's something between the group and the monetary officer. But I think it's inappropriate to make comments about that officer and that decision made because there is a separate process for that if people aren't happy. But we do have a set constitution and how motions work here, and we have an officer that we appoint to do that role. And there are mechanisms if a group isn't happy with those decisions. What I'd also like to say is to thank the people who did take part in the group for the work on it. Again, it's behind the scenes, so to speak, a lot of effort put into the task finish group here. I think what makes sense is from reading through the report, there's going to be a lot of work done in the autumn in terms of waiting for the DFT. So potentially an item to come back in the future once that report's in and been taken through by the executive to look at what recommendations are going to do, that we can potentially bring that back to review and put our opinions in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything to add? Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members will know that the Independent Alliance put forward a suggestion as agreed by this and the previous Communities and Place Committee for free off-peak travel.
So again, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you. I know exactly where you're going to go with that. That was all discussed in the task and finish group. Nobody from the Independent Alliance turned up for those meetings. That was the big opportunity to put them forward.
Point of order. Yep. He still has the right to scrutinise, and that's what he's about to do. So can he please finish, Chair?
But there's nothing. There's nothing to scrutinise. We are here to scrutinise this piece of work that's gone forward from a task and finish group that have all been accepted. So there's nothing else to scrutinise outside the scope of what this report is here.
If I may ask, Mr. Chairman, the response is in the appendix that I've read. Can I ask what process was taken to suggest it to the Department of Transport? Can we have copies of emails and such like, and details of any meetings that members or officers of this council had with the Department of Transport when this was suggested and what the outcome was?
Officers?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Yeah, we included that in as part of the formal response to the concessionary fares review that the government have currently undertaken. That the response close-off time was at the end of June. So I've actually got the wording for it here. Just let me find it. Mindful of the work of the Place Select Committee, we said we would like consideration to be given to including a veterans scheme eligibility like that on offer in London, and also the extension to include young people should be considered. So we haven't had any meetings with the DFT as such, but we've included it as part of that consultation. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Okay. So with that, I move that the recommendation, the Place Select Committee receives and notes the response of the Cabinet member arising from the committee's review of the concessionary travel, and that the Place Committee continues to monitor the implementation of the recommendations arising from the committee's review of concessionary travel. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Callaghan, thank you very much. All those in favour? Okay. Those against? And abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. Right. So next on the agenda is the work programme. So this will be introduced by Noel.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, basically the work programme before you is for consideration by you now. Just ask you to note that work will be carried out over the summer to develop a new work programme for the municipal year, and the work will be carried out with the chair, vice chair, and the senior scrutiny lead, Martin Elliott. Members will also have the opportunity to make suggestions for items to be included in advance in the work programme being approved by the Overview Committee in September. Thank you.
Councillor Allen. Can you just put your microphone on?
Not used to doing this, you see, you can tell. On behalf of Councillor Gowland, she requested that there's more discussion on charging points, certainly in West Bridgford. Okay. I'll leave you to sort that out.
Right. I'm assuming that's electric car charging points. I would guess. Yeah. So we can certainly add that to the list. Councillor Callaghan.
You know, the free school meals project on page 53. Is this to be scheduled prior to the next Place Committee meeting?
To my knowledge, it's not been.
Right.
So it is on the work programme, but it's not been scheduled in. That's part of what we're going to do over the summer. So I don't know at which meeting that will come to.
That's currently on the long list.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Just not sure it's type or not. Page 54 for the 21-hour pilot schemes. It's got counter responsibility for communities. Should that be transport environment? Just to clarify.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said then.
Page 54.
Yeah.
For the 21-hour pilot schemes, it's got the counter responsibilities communities. So I'm just checking that should be transport environment.
It probably should be transport and environment. I'm sure Councillor Cotty will be very pleased that that's not going to be down to him. So we'll get that amended. Thank you very much for that. All I would say is that if anybody has got, excuse me, if anybody has got any comments or suggestions for the work programme, then please email myself or Martin Elliott or Kate, who will add them to the list, and they will get discussed over the summer. But with that, if there's nothing else, I will close the meeting. Thanks everybody for your input today, and I hope you all have a good summer. Thank you.